welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, the Prime Minister has pulled off a very successful visit to Israel, breaking a lot of barriers. First, he was of course the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel, and secondly by dehyphenating Israel from Palestine. How will this play out on the global stage and also more importantly in our immediate neighbourhood? Joining me for this discussion, I have a panel of experts. Professor Harsh Pant, he's a professor in International Studies at King's College. I have, of course, Dr. Subramanian Swamy, BJP leader, Rajya Sabha member, and also someone who knows a lot about the background that went into before the Prime Minister went to Israel. We have former External Affairs Minister from the Congress, Salman Khurshid, and of course, Pawan Verma, a former diplomat and also a JDU member. Dr. Swamy, before we go to the visit, can you tell us a bit about the making of the visit?
Well, as soon as Narendra Modi took oath of office, almost the first request came from the Israelis, saying that he should visit Israel. Now, the transition period, we created a snafu when our government voted with Hamas in one resolution. And there was a big uproar in at least our circles. And that's the time when began the question of how to retool this whole policy towards Israel. The party is 100% behind a total commitment to Israel. You see, that's one fundamental point which Modi, he may have wanted to fine-tune it different way, but this particular aspect has been very strong. And the Israelis were no less in putting the pressure up for a meeting. And it got put off. It was originally supposed to be 2015. And then the question that many of us, including myself, said he should not do what we are expecting the Americans not to do, that is go to Pakistan and India. Why this thing? You invite the Palestinian Authorities President, Abbas, his name is, to India, which he did, and he did come. And therefore, in that context, this whole visit was structured. But it's a strategic alliance because we think they give the best information as far as terrorism is concerned. They give us technology which even the Americans don't give. They take this drones, they give it fitted with the weaponry, which the Americans don't. So, and there is an emotional, there is an emotional tie-up. And there's been never any conflict between Jews and Hindus. That's been a factor too. Which is the main thing.
Now, Mr. Khurshid, one question is that you let an opportunity slip by because it was Narasimha Rao who actually established diplomatic ties with Israel. Why wait this long gap?
Well, I think that let's understand that there was nothing could be static. Things had to change. Things had to move, and if India opted to have a relationship with Israel, it wasn't that the Arabs didn't have a relationship with Israel. Arabs had moved faster than India had moved, because that's the reality of the world, that you cannot just ostracize and cut off somebody completely, even if you're not happy with their points of view. And many people are not happy with Israel's point of view. I mean, in the United States, there are many people in the United States who are not happy with the settlements policy of Israel. But that doesn't mean that you don't deal with them, you don't talk to them, you don't have conversations, and that's exactly what we did. But it's a matter of how quickly, how far. Mr. Modi and his party and people like Mr. Subramanian Swamy have come to a conclusion that you've got to escalate the speed, and they've done it. Now, does it have implications? Does it have a price that you need to pay? These are all things they will factor in, and it's their decision. They are in government, they are in power. It's their decision. We are not quite sure that we are completely on the same page with them, particularly because they don't talk to us. They don't tell us what they're doing.
Why are you not talking to them? Domestic issues, I know, even on foreign issues.
They have informal contacts with very important people in our party, which I have been objecting to.
So there are back channel talks. But on a more serious note, Pawan, how do you see this visit, and did they miss a chance?
No, I think that foreign policy is not about what a particular party supports. Foreign policy is a matter of national self-interest. And I think that's the beginning point, and therefore it's significant that diplomatic relations were established under a Congress government led by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. Since then, we are celebrating 25 years of diplomatic relations. The President of India went to Israel in 2015. I think it was in the fitness of things that this was taken forward by a visit by a Prime Minister. And I do not believe that in foreign policy two events or two policies are irrevocably hyphenated. In other words, our support for a just solution to the Palestinian cause is not in contradiction to our strengthening and deepening our relations with Israel, because we have diplomatic relations with them. Even Egypt and Jordan established those diplomatic ties before India did, and they are Arab countries. I think there is much that India can benefit from. It was mentioned that in terms of counter-terrorism, in terms of intelligence sharing, in terms of defense and weaponry we can get, but even more importantly, or as importantly, in agriculture and irrigation, in space, there are synergies, and I think these need to be strengthened. So I believe the visit was timely. It was in the fitness of things given the evolution of the relationship, and we will now judge it by its outcomes.
Professor Band, your take on the visit first.
In terms of strategy, it's a well-crafted visit because it comes after very successful visits to our Arab partners. So Saudi Arabia and Qatar and UAE. Mr. Modi has visited those countries, established a rapport there, and I think then he moves on to Israel, which, as Dr. Swami pointed out, was first. Many people thought it was first on the agenda. But I think crafting larger Middle East policy is what is important for India, not simply having bilateral ties with individual countries. And I think there he scores very well.
Also, Dr. Swami, the timing of the visit, a lot of people are saying he waited till the midpoint in his career, tenure to do it and didn't do it earlier.
Yeah. Well, there are many things which from beginning he felt that he shouldn't do it in the first 2 years. And his rhetoric also now, for example, talking about the electricity rate for Kabristan and Shamshan Bhumi,
Yes, the UP elections.
something he would never have done in the first year. This triple talaq, putting pressure on the Supreme Court to take it up. I think more is coming, which is of the agenda. I am sure that Roundtable, although the instrument will be my court case, but there's a lot of ground level support
We
which
saw
was not there
some
before.
stones being moved there.
No, that is being
But
ready
what's the
for
connection between Ram Temple and Israel?
Israel.
Is
No,
the
I'm saying that it's part of the agenda. See, the Israel friendship of the kind that is now we are seeing in this visit is always been considered as part of of Indians who support Israel are those who are against Muslims. I mean, that's sort of a typecasting has been there. Although, in my opinion, the entire period, I was the first one openly to go to Israel in 1981 or 82, when as a member of parliament and deputy leader of the Janata Party, I went to Israel, was received by Menachem Begin. At that time, Mrs. Gandhi, in the open parliament, urged me not to go, because she said it will create enormous misunderstanding. I said, I'm not your member of your party, why should there be misunderstanding? She said, no, people will not believe that you are going without some tacit support. Now, at that time, the biggest and most fierce lobby against my visit was the Soviet lobby. And the Soviet lobby always regarded the Israelis as a passport to the United States. And that's why Syria and Libya and Egypt and so on were putting up that stiff resistance at that time. So, I don't think this timing is because only for Israel. I think many of the Hindutva platforms, I think you will find Modi articulating the next 2 years.
Do you also see this link?
I think it's very sad that something that could be seen as my dear friend sees the whole world in a strategic dimension, that you're reducing such an important strategic position to what may be a significant domestic point of view here. But I think that it's important that these relationships and these movements survive the dominance of the point of view that Professor Swami is talking about. May last 5 years, may last 10 years, may last 15 years, but it may not last indefinitely. And there is a lot more to it than we are making out here as a pressure or a preference of a Hindu lobby, etc. No, Palestine had across-the-board support in our country. Yes, there were people who said, why are we ignoring Israel? And therefore, if Israel gets recognition and Israel becomes a part of our scheme of things, wonderful. But when you go to Israel, as a country of the stature of India, we must find at least 5 minutes to say, all is not well here, and India is worried. China comes and says that here, Russia goes and says that elsewhere, United States comes and says it in India, President Obama came and said it in India, and we should also, when we arrive in the world with this grandiose eloquence that we have, we should also be clear that we are friends, but as friends, we're not blind. There is something more that you should know, something more that we think that you should do. I'm sorry, we seem to have missed that completely.
No, may I just want to muscle into your time. When the Palestinian Authority was created in 1992, there was a clear understanding that Palestine and Israel will work towards a two-state solution by mutual accommodation. The election of the Hamas in Gaza has put an end to that hope, and Hamas is now firmly in position, and they say that destruction of Israel is a part of our program. In this context, I don't see why we should be stuck with the Congress theory of equidistance and in fact, Palestinians have a nation that's called Jordan. 56% of Jordan is Palestinians.
No, I just want to say, in my view, there is no, I have to repeat this, there is no Hindutva foreign policy. At least I have not yet come across it. I have been a professional diplomat for many years.
But if you link the events together, I may tend to agree with Dr. Swami.
Let me complete with that. There is a national foreign policy. There is not a Hindu foreign policy and a Muslim foreign policy. It almost begs the question that soon we may have a Sikh foreign policy.
No. Hindus are 80%. Don't put it as a Sikh.
Therefore,
the
point is that there is only one foreign policy which is ultimately in an enduring sense valid, and that is national self-interest. And I think a lot of water has flowed down the Yamuna since 1981, when we had what I would call the historic visit of Dr. Subramanian Swamy. And now, we were at the heyday of the non-aligned movement. There were other pressures. The world had a different configuration. Today, the situation is different. As far as what Salman said about raising issues which are about solving regional or local problems, and certainly Palestine continues to be an important factor in that region, I do hope, and I am confident almost, that it must have been discussed as part of the delegation level or one-to-one level talks about what the situation is in the region. I don't believe that if you are making a visit to Israel for the first time in the history of independent India as Prime Minister, and while you have made public your cause for Palestine separately and have maintained it for decades, you necessarily have to use Israel as a platform to reiterate it, thereby falling flat between both stools, neither pleasing the Israelis nor the Palestinians. So I think we shouldn't see foreign policy as a mechanical 1, 2, 3 kind of a formula. It's a creative and innovative process. The time had come for it. The process had been begun by the Congress party. It has reached a fruition. Now let us judge it by its outcomes.
But I want to play the devil's advocate, and Mr. Khurshid, you're wearing a saffron tie, so I'm going to bring in the saffron color here. Don't you see a saffron agenda here behind what, there is a culmination of events?
See, people get very upset about using the word saffron to describe a way of life thought, and I think that's possibly wrong. I think this is shorthand that we shouldn't use if somebody gets upset about it. The idea of how much of domestic philosophical thinking is going to influence foreign policy is anybody's guess. It will. You can't compartmentalize your life. But I agree with Pawan that you can't you can't pick one particular political strand and say this is our foreign policy. There will be differences, shades will differ, etc. But there is the thing about consensus, and that consensus must be a sustained one. If Professor Swami and Mr. Modi succeed in a sustained consensus on what their position on Israel is, well, congratulations, good for you. But I believe that will not happen. It's far more complicated, and we will have to speak up. There will be another vote. Last time you were upset, possibly things hadn't filtered down to
your policy, they were continuing.
Well, obviously things hadn't filtered down, you hadn't changed enough people, etc. And now, now you have.
He's very confident he has.
But I think these questions will arise again and again, and you will have to deal with them, and you will have to tackle them, as the United States of America has had to. United States of America upsets Israel by saying no to the settlement policy. Now will India say yes or no to settlement policy, whether it's on the quiet on the first trip, you don't say it, on the second trip will you say it, when they come here will you say it? These are open-ended questions, but we are not in a hurry that you find a solution today and you find an articulation today, but it will have to come.
Okay, we need to take a short break, but we're going to come back and also try and answer some of the open-ended questions that have been raised by Mr. Khurshid. So stay with us. Welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We are here discussing the fallout of the Prime Minister's visit to Israel. Professor Pant, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think, for those who look at Indian foreign policy from the outside, I think there has always been a domestic dimension to Indian foreign policy. So to say that domestic politics, we can say in an ideal world does not matter. But I think if you study any foreign policy, domestic voices matter. If you look at the literature on Indian foreign policy, and especially India's Israel policy, there was always an argument that because Congress party has a certain attitude towards this problem, therefore there has been a hesitancy in sort of opening out to Israel. And I don't think there is, there should be any hesitation in acknowledging the fact.
Israel has come out of the closet,
Yes,
really.
I mean,
Early on it
So
was...
I understand this, the issue of hesitancy, I understand. There was well-described hesitancy. But I was a little surprised that hesitancy now goes, fine, good enough. But I heard the Prime Minister say, we've been friends since birth. Since birth of Israel they've been friends? Or have those two been friends? I don't know. But we have not been friends with Israel since birth. Maybe we should have been, maybe we should not have been, that's a different thing. But why go out and give messages that are not true? They're not honest messages.
Domestic constituencies in any democracy will play an influencing role, but it is precisely the role of the government to weigh the options between various pressures and craft a foreign policy that corresponds best to national self-interest rather than to any particular domestic lobby. To that extent, foreign policy is both influenced but is not held hostage to it. That's the point I was really
May I ask him a question?
Trouble is that self-interest is now being redefined.
Yeah,
that's
right.
the problem.
Yes,
I
but
mean,
yeah, I
there
mean,
is, of course, self-interest is something you can't get away from. We thought it was enlightened self-interest. I now believe you have self-interest per se, etc. But that's
Now,
the
let me
disagreement.
ask you a question. Are you in favor of India telling Palestine Authority that unless Hamas changes its stand, we will not talk about settlements?
I think it's inevitable. But the point is, if you're honest...
We haven't done it so far.
No, we haven't done a lot of things. But to be honest, you should be able to say, Hamas has to change this attitude. And Israel, you can't simply say, we've drawn a line and we will not talk about it. I mean, I think if you have self-confidence as a nation, no matter what the color and hue of your nation is, and if you have the confidence that we saw on the screen of Prime Minister in Israel and the support that he got in Israel, as indeed he did in the Arab countries, he should be able, with confidence, to say, there is a point, but we won't talk about it now on the first visit, we're going to do a working visit later.
Pawan, but also what we all like to see, the body language of the two. This is not Prime Minister's first visit, it's as Prime Minister, but he's been there as Chief Minister also. So he has, he's been drawn towards Israel for a long time. So the personality does come into the play.
No, but if you're looking at body language, tell me which head of state or government he hasn't hugged. I mean, even Mr. Donald Trump was taken a little by surprise while his arms were around him in a bear hug. He was wondering how to respond. However, in the case of Prime Minister
But
Netanyahu,
that's a very Indian thing to do, no?
it
To
is.
hug.
It is. In fact, I write in one of my books that there are gestures which are collectively belong to people. Like, for instance, the hug, which I used to find when I was posted abroad, was very alien to some people. It was a cold handshake. Whereas when we meet old friends, we will give them a hug. So it's a different idiom. So therefore, I think the body language was one thing. The substantive aspect of the visit is another thing. I would like to, in greater detail, see what was achieved, what were the congruences that came about, and what were, in short, the confidential discussions which we won't know, but which deal with different regions, their region and our region. And I think that's the subtext of all diplomacy.
So what would you like to see to call it a successful visit? What would be your benchmarks?
Well, I think that if we understand each other better, there are important takeaways, the equipment, the defense equipment, etc. I think that's extremely important. But I don't think we should get fixed on we've got defense equipment.
We've been getting it all
etc.
along also.
We've been getting it along. It's good that we get from them. I hope that Americans will open up a little bit more. I hope the Russians don't go cold on us, etc. If we need defense equipment, we must get it. And we must appreciate somebody who's giving it to us. But more than that, it must not be just embracing and kissing and shaking hands. It must be when you're taking important strategic decisions about the world, there must be convergence, and if there's no convergence, there should be at least an honest ability to hear what the other person has.
I have one question, last question.
For Mr. Khurshid.
Yeah,
Well, you're the
yeah, because he's the
representation
alternative.
of all that's wrong in his eyes. All that's right.
If, as a step forward, and Trump is a believer in give and take, I think most of the world is, India, Israel and the United States meet and say, we have complementarities. You Indians have got a manpower, we Americans have got weapons, and the Israelis got intelligence. So let's pool it. You agree to police the Indian Ocean and land troops in Afghanistan, and we'll open our warehouses to pick whatever weapons that you want. Would you be in favor of such an agreement?
My instincts say this is on a sliding slope. It's dangerous. And I think that this is what Americans have often dreamt of, is getting India to be their natural allies. That's not what we're going to be. Partners, yes. Allies, no. So in all this very tricky questions that you have thrown at me, where do we draw a line between partners and strategic partners and allies is important. And I think even for Mr. Modi, for all your confidence, that will remain an important factor in our country.
Okay.
Even in terms of hypothetical questions, I think this question asked by Dr. Swami to Salman, quite frankly, takes the cake. Because to speak of a scenario which has not evolved and which involves a level of coordination and giveaways to each other, I think is not a fair question to ask to anybody, including the Prime Minister himself. But what can be possible is that within an overall context, and I keep repeating it because I think that's important to even overarch certain domestic lobbies. National self-interest, if Israel, India and the United States can come together in areas which are of mutual benefit, it would be good for the country.
good for the country. Any last questions or can I end?
Well,
I have been through this
I'm
all
going
my
to ask
life. That I say something and they say it's fantastic, it's something not in the realm of reality, and ultimately that's what happens.
Another round
Well,
table. Last question.
I just think I get a feeling that I've been asked this question. It's only a trial balloon. This is a question that he's going to quietly pop to Mr. Modi himself.
Yes,
Is that true?
I've already done it.
You've already done it. What is his answer?
Well,
Probably delaying his return.
Okay, on that note, I have to end now. It began as a round table, but I think in the end, I'll have to thank Dr. Swami for helping me co-anchor by asking Mr. Khurshid a lot of good questions. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching this show.
Thank you.